Okay. All right. Good morning. As a preliminary matter, this is John Brescher, chair of the Town Government Study Committee. Please permit me to confirm that all members in person anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Rick Atherton.
Here. Curtis
Barnes. Thank you, Curtis. He raised his hand. Linda Williams.
Here.
And John Brescher is here as well. Chair, we are anticipating Tucker Holland will show up at some point. We have no staff and we don't necessarily have any anticipated speakers on the agenda, but I do see that Mr. Gasparo arrived. Hello, Art. So I'll get into this. Good morning. This open meeting of the Town Government Study Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order on March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. This order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment to those members of the public that have joined via Zoom. For this meeting, the Town Government Study Committee is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. For Zoom meetings, please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I, the chair, notes otherwise. All right, now we're going to turn to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, let's go over some ground rules for effective, clear conduct of our business to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with any public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public who have joined via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted via roll call vote. Fantastic. I am so sick of that. All right, so let's get into the first item of the agenda, which is an approval of the agenda as written. I may have a motion to approve said agenda.
So moved. It's Rick.
Okay, motion was made by Linda, seconded by Rick. Let's do a roll call vote here. Rick Atherton.
Aye.
Curtis Barnes. All right, thank you, Curtis. Linda Williams.
I already said yes.
Terrific. Let's double it up.
I made the motion.
And the chair, John Brescher, votes aye as well. Okay, so next item is public comment. Any members of the public wish to address anything at this time before we go down into the agenda? Art or Hillary? No? Fantabulous. Okay. Next up, we have the minutes. So we had some changes to the minutes of March 16th, and then I circulated the minutes of March 30th. Any comments, questions, etc.? Or if not, can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Oh. Curtis, is that a motion or you have a question?
I made the motion.
Yeah, I was thinking if he was going to second it. Okay, great. It's tough with we're going to mime our way through this today. Okay, so we'll do all those in favor by roll call vote. Rick Atherton.
Aye.
Curtis Barnes. Great, thank you. Linda Williams.
Aye.
And the chair, John Brescher, votes aye as well. Great, thank you all very much. All right, next item on the agenda is we're going into our discussion of the unresolved items on the topics to investigate list. First item is 5A, the review of the presentation of the NP and EDC. Thank you, Hillary, again for presentation last meeting, which feels like, it was only 2 weeks ago, but feels like an eternity these days. Basically, I thought it was a very interesting presentation. I thought it was very good. I think we can open it up to the committee right now to see if this is something that we are sort of prepared to deal with at this time, or if we include this in the in our report as one of the topics to address at a future date. So I'll open it up to the committee to start that discussion.
You want to open it up to the committee?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Go for it, Linda.
I did not change my mind from my comments the last time. And we've gotten the email from the chairman of the NPDC and the chairman of the planning board. And I wholeheartedly support that email explaining how the presentation was incorrect, based on incorrect facts, and not within our purview. So I stand firm on this of not doing anything or making any recommendation based on that presentation. And that's all I'm going to say on the fact. I don't want to waste any more time discussing it personally.
Okay. Rick, go for it.
So John, happy to follow up. It seems to me that our purview includes the broad scope of towns' governing processes, procedures, and committees. And I thought the presentation, the written thoughts, a couple of them were worthy of further discussion at some point. One specifically talking about making sure the NP and EDC, let's call it the charter, if you will, recognizes sustainability, environmental issues that ought to be included as part of their charge, because I think the way it's written, it's much more limiting. And such changes, I would find hard to understand why they wouldn't be welcomed by the community. They don't change anything else. They just make sure the NP and EDC has a broader charge than currently enumerated. So I think that's a good one. I think the question of how you appoint the public members is also worthy of discussion. I understand the point of the memo received from Wagner and Lowell that other members of the NP and EDC, some are elected, but they're elected through a different board process. They're not elected directly to that board. And I just think that board then would benefit from a broader perspective of appointing those committee members. I think that also then is worthy of, at the very least, a note in our report that the town and perhaps the select board ought to review those issues as well and see if they concur in any way that moving forward might make sense. If they don't, then that's another issue for us to deal with. I think having the chair of the NP and EDC be invited to a subsequent meeting would be a good point for further discussion. There's nothing like hearing directly and making sure he states why environmental concerns should not be part of the charter. I think that's something he could explain to us. So those are my thoughts.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Curtis, we can hear you. Awesome.
Okay, my audio is back.
Yes.
Lucky you guys.
Fantastic.
No, the only question was, can you hear me? Because I've been screwing around with the thing. So
Yes, we can hear you.
I in essence agree with Rick's comments.
Okay.
We ought to hear more.
All right.
I have
So,
a real problem with that when the chairman of both of those entities have not been approached by Hillary, nor have they been approached as to why her findings are not based on fact, which were clearly delineated in the email from both of those chairmen. That I think we're way off base here. And I don't think we should give any credibility to it until whatever is presented to us is based on actual fact. And how we are completely different from the Vineyard with 6 or 7 towns, and how we're completely different from the Cape, and how we were all set up differently for a reason. And not just because we don't like the NPDC or the planning board or the agreement that was made with the town. There is a reason why we're this way. We are a single entity town. We are not multiple towns trying to herd a bunch of angry cats over the Vineyard or a bunch of different towns on the Cape. We're different. We do fight for what we want. We do bring in the tip money. I was a member of that board for 10 years. I don't understand why we're going after the planning commission. I really don't. When the facts that were presented are not legit.
So I'm going to interject for a second here and say I don't think we're going over the merits of the presentation at this point. I think the question before the committee is if we want to sort of investigate further, or rather just say what we do with this question that has been brought before us. And if it's, you know, do we invite Judith or Nat in to discuss before making any type of recommendation, or do we leave this as sort of the HDC charter where we say, okay, guys, or rewriting the HDC saying this is worthy of being looked at, but now is not the time.
What are we looking at though, Mr. Chairman?
Well,
what exactly are we supposed to do with this?
Well, that's
rewrite
there
the
it is.
NPDC legislation, which has to go to the state?
Well, therein lies the question. I mean, is there something that we have before us to discuss with the NPDC? I mean,
Not if it's not based on fact.
Sorry, what was that?
Not if it's not based on actual fact.
Rick, I think you were going to say something.
Well, I think the question of, Linda says it's based on fact, and I don't think the question of whether the charge should be broadened to include, for example, environmental stewardship, along with the other parts of the charge, is a question of fact. I think it's a question that's worthy of discussion directly with Wegner and Lowell. And I think we all benefit from inviting them to a subsequent meeting. I think that's reasonably harmless, Linda, and I think well within our broad scope. And so I would recommend that we pursue that and ask them to join us. And then we can go over what people think are appropriate items to discuss. It's not a matter of fact that all these things are true or not true without an open discussion.
I did ask them if they wanted to come.
Whoa, wait, whoa. You shouldn't be asking them.
Well, I brought it up because they brought it up to me.
Okay, well, we do invitations distribute through the chair.
I said, would they want an invitation? And they said no at this time.
Curtis, Curtis, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, just to follow up, I think I hear from Linda that they've said they don't want an invitation. I think that's very different from our issue an invitation. And if we think it's worthy of discussion and issue an invitation and they refuse to come, that's their choice. But we don't take choices like this without going properly through the chair to the people we're inviting. That is just out of line.
Curtis,
I was not out of line. They discussed it with me when I was in the office.
Linda, that's.
So don't tell me I'm out of line.
Yeah, this one it should be going through the chair.
Absolutely, and I said, would you entertain such a thing? When they asked me.
All right, let's have Curtis speak.
My question is inviting them to speak, doing anything to move our committee forward, or is it strictly conversation and information and it doesn't have anything to help us move this thing to a report?
Well, that's a fantastic question, Curtis. I'm glad you sort of circled back to this one because I think at this point we are really gearing up. I'd like to believe for our report to town meeting, and while this is this is clearly a discussion point, or if we were inviting them in. There's nothing that we can really do at this town meeting as it relates to NP and EDC or any recommendations. This would be effectively a recommendation, in my opinion, to say this is something of further study that we should be,
Okay, that's the whole point. So
Exactly.
let's not waste a lot of time talking. Let's say if we think it should be pursued, let's make that part of our report and move this report.
I am 100% on board with that idea.
I'm more interested in trying to get town council to respond.
Town council,
Looking for that
the
unicorn.
invisible town council.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, to be fair, I have not asked her. I will type the email and give her a phone call as soon as we're done with this meeting. But I agree.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, well, we'll try. Hillary, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make one statement for the record, because it's been said that the briefing document that I gave you was filled with things that weren't fact and false. And there's nothing that was not factual in my briefing document. There was also not opinion in my briefing document. My briefing document was assembled from cut and pasted public sources. So I would appreciate, for the record, if this commission would actually make a determination and not ignore that statement, because it's a little disconcerting to say, you know, that this briefing document was false. If you think it was false, I guess I would like to know why, but I would like to defend the integrity of my work and the information in the document. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not super inclined to discuss the factual merits of this briefing document for a very simple reason of sort of whatever it was, it was, but our charge right now is how we're going to proceed with our discussions as it relates to this matter. I'm not looking to adjudicate, you know, or go line by line about what may or may not be accurate, where it was cut and pasted from. That's not, frankly, I don't think that's the best use of our time at this standpoint. I understand your concern and I appreciate it, but I don't think that's what we need to be doing today. So back.
Okay, well, for the record, I do uphold the integrity of the work. Thank you very much for doing that.
Duly noted, and minute taker, we'll make sure that's included.
Sean, if I might follow up on that.
Yes, Rick.
You know, if the minutes are going to include Linda's comments, I want to be recorded as saying I disagree with her comments. I think there are no statements of facts that back up that assertion. And just so we all understand, I also think if we're not going to invite Mr. Lowell, and I don't know if that's the case, I might make a motion to do so. At the very least, we should make a comment about the NP and EDC, its importance, and it's would be sensible to include some additional language that would correspond to the select board's strategic goals in the environmental area. So, and I think it's worthy of getting on the record. So I'd like to make a motion that we invite Nat Lowell and Judith Wagner to a subsequent meeting to explore these issues. Thank you. That's my motion.
Okay.
Can I amend that motion to include their letter in our minutes?
No problem at all. All public documents received by the committee, I'm sure the chair recognizes as could be included, both those presented by the public and by the Wagner-Lowell memo.
Sure. Okay, so basically the motion would be to invite Nat and Judith to a subsequent meeting to discuss NP and EDC issues as it relates sort of to our committee. And I think that's where we would go from there, and to include the memorandum, or excuse me, the email.
I will second the motion, only to have the discussion, get them in there. Let's hear what they have to say, and then let's move on.
Okay, motion made. Second. All right, any discussion on the motion? If not, let's go on. Let's go and roll call vote here. Curtis, or Rick Atherton,
Aye.
Linda Williams.
Nay.
Great. Curtis.
Aye.
All right, and the chair will vote aye in order to have them in, because I do think it's nice to have a discussion.
But let's get this thing done quickly, have a special meeting, do it next week. Let's not wait 2 weeks. Let's get going.
Judith has been ill. So I
Right.
don't know if she can come. It could be a member of the staff.
Yeah, and it may just, it may just be, heck, it may just be Nat as part of NPDC. We'll see. We'll throw the invite out and we'll see what we can get. All right. Moving on the agenda, which I think again sort of dovetails nicely into this, is expanding the role and redefining the Town Government Study Committee and the Town Governance Committee. So we sent out some links in the
Very
body
interesting stuff.
of the email about potentially expanding. Well, and the gist of it is we either potentially expand the role of the Government Study Committee, or we have town administration create a new governance committee, because it seems to me that we've had a handful of issues that have come across our desk over the last 3 years that go beyond the scope of what we are looking at, or what our initial charge is. And I think that was made all the more apparent last meeting with Matt Fee, effectively asking us to do, for lack of a better term, asking us to do more, which is fine. But it's interesting how the sort of town administration and select board, since they were the ones who appointed us, feel that they are going in a certain direction, or want this to go in a certain direction, which is a-okay. I don't necessarily think that direction is what the charge of the committee is in the charter. And so it would lead to sort of two options off the bat. One would be that you amend the charter to expand or clarify the role of the Government Study Committee to make it more broad. The alternative would be that you have something to the effect of a Government Study Committee in its current configuration, current form, meets every 5 to 7 years, whatever that may be, and then say, and then have a separate governance committee created.
So the standing committee, you're
Yeah.
saying it would be a standing committee?
I would say that there would be a different, and this is just spitballing, truly, nothing solid. That we would have a separate, could be a standing committee. It would be through, I think, town administration, and it would perform a lot of the functions that we performed over the last few years, which would be reviewing warrant articles, hearing, for lack of a better term, complaints, questions, concerns about the way that the actual departments interact and function, which I think is sort of more of the minutia, as opposed to the Government Study Committee, which is looking at the whole town government from a more macro level. So I think it's an interesting concept, an interesting idea. And I'd love to hear what the committee has to say about these, or this concept.
I think it's
Well,
a
that
great
should be
idea.
part of our final report then. We should recommend it if we believe in it as part of our final report.
I think we need to flesh it out more. So I think it's a great idea, but because the Government Study Review Committee is part of the charter on a regular basis, I forget, is it every 5 years, John?
I thought it was 7 for some reason, but maybe it's 5.
I think it's 5, but we can check that.
5,
But I think
okay.
that needs to stay there, because we
Yep.
don't need to go back to the state to fix that.
Yep.
But I think creating a governance study committee is something that could be done either in the charter or by the selectmen, by just establishing that committee. I don't think we need to go back to the state, or I don't think we need to adjust the charter necessarily. But certainly we have to figure out how the other towns did it. And I don't know if those towns are council members or if they're still Board of Selectmen. I forgot to look at that part.
Curtis, yes.
I'm interested in the conversation, but I'm concerned that both Campbell and Tucker are not with us today. And I'd sure like to survey them and see how they feel about this question. I mean, personally, I say, okay, put it in the report, but you know, they're two important people and Campbell did all that research, and I wish she were here to tell us what she thought.
Sure. That's a fair point, Curtis. I mean, I candidly, I think I don't want to speak for her, but I think she's likely interested in this, but I agree. It would be nice to hear from her directly. Rick.
Yeah, so I went to Andover, which was one of the things, and it says it's the town governance study committee. You know, I also looked up the definition of governance and tried to make sure I got the distinction, which I suspect is not terribly helpful, frankly. So Andover says the town governance study committee shall be charged with studying and proposing beneficial amendments to the town's charter, bylaws, and governing practices as they relate to Andover's form of government and governance. Now, if you read that sentence, it seems to me it says most of what ours says also. We just pick it up at the end of our charge and other matters, okay? You know, people want to say governance, that's fine. I think governance refers to the way we do business almost on a day-to-day basis in lots of different activities. And I'm not sure if you exclude that, then you ought to think about what you're trying to limit it to. And if all you want to do is read the charter and say, I'd like to change section 6 from this to that and go home, that's fine. I think the intent, and if you look at the report of the last committee, they have 25 recommendations. I would venture to say all of them are related to governance. They were not related to changing the charter. And without that, the committee's structure and mission, I think, is very limited. And if that's what people want, then I understand that. I don't think that's what people anticipated when they added this section to the charter. But I don't mind amending it and adding language that makes it clear we have a broader scope than some may wish that we do.
Well, Rick, I'm going to add one other interesting distinction between us and Andover. I believe Andover reports to the select board. That they're as opposed to us reporting to town meeting.
Right. That's fine.
And I think that's a sort of a critical distinction in all of this.
Right. And you know, let's be frank, if we can be honest with each other for the moment. I think partly because of the so-called pandemic or whatever, our interaction with the select board and the town administration has been limited, to say the least.
That's diplomatic.
And our access to town council has been extremely limited. So that part of what you're saying, I understand, John. If we report to town meeting and we don't have a budget, we have no power of persuasion of these other bodies, and they don't want to participate with us, then it's really an academic exercise. And maybe our report shouldn't go to the selectmen at all. It should go direct to town meeting, because that's maybe what we need to explain to town meeting, that our charge has been circumscribed in many ways and limited. Anyway, people can comment on that and see how they feel.
Well, I'd be worried about that.
Go ahead, Linda.
Because politically, I think we'd be shooting ourselves in the head.
I think we're not supposed to be afraid of politics, if you will. If we are, we don't need to go to.
And I don't think we'll get buy-in if we circumvent them entirely.
I understand. The report could go, look, I'm just trying to make what I think is an obvious observation. And 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 the phrase governance, if we want to assume that using that phrase is meant to, and without it is meant to limit what we do. I don't think it does. I think you read what the definition is and the common usage of the term, it includes 85% of what we've already been discussing for the past couple of years.
Curtis.
Well, what I'm hearing is, and John, I believe you said this to me, we report to town meeting. We submit a report to town meeting. At town meeting, does that report include an article, not yet written, to create that a governance committee that reports to the Board of Selectmen? Is that the long way we're getting around it?
Well, it's an interesting point, Curtis, because we could. I mean, that's one option is to, I mean, it would have to be for the next year's town meeting that we could create it through the charter, but it could be something that the select board is empowered to do on their own, that they would have the ability to set up a governance, sort of an independent governance.
That's fine. I mean, if that's where we're going, I'm trying to get something done. We submit a report to town meeting. They say, thank you very much, and file it, and nothing happens. But at some point, if we're going to impact the way things are done, I think it's going to have to be with or through the Board of the Select Board to achieve that objective. So somehow at some point they need to create us as something else that's ongoing and working with them.
I don't necessarily disagree with that.
I agree.
Well,
with
then give me the alternative if that's not the way to do it. Tell me how best to do it.
I think you may be onto something there, Curtis. Yes, Rick.
One sort of closing observation, and then, we can all do what we want to do here. If the select board was interested in a governance committee,
Right.
nothing is slowing them down over the past 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, 1 year to do that. We may want to address them and say, we think it's a good idea that they do that if we want to bypass town meeting. And I understand that when town meeting passes a bylaw or a charter change that directs the selectmen to do something, often the result is just the opposite. They get their back up and they say, you don't tell me what to do. I'm perfectly capable of managing the town the way we're doing it. So, I understand that. So there's a little bit of each involved here.
I just want to know where we're going and how we're going to get there.
Why don't we just make a comment in our report that we think we've dealt with a distinction some people are drawing, and we would suggest that the select board and review it, and we think it's important that in some way they open up the process to a committee that helps them from an outside perspective, dealing with how they're governing and its impact on the citizens who elect them to represent them.
So that would sort of be like a FinCom or an audit committee that it advises or recommends to the select board.
If that's what your pleasure is.
for the public.
Yes, that's right, Linda. That is a very good point too. I mean, sort of lingering in the background is the Clifford and Teresa Williams Warren article, and this is it's an interesting potential solution for that. I mean, this is something that that could effectively help with that. Yes, Rick.
Well, just sorry to chime in again, but we already voted and dismissed and wrote a letter, I believe.
Either 2 or 3 times, yeah.
2 or 3 times regarding the Teresa Williams recommendation. So to then morph into that through this recommendation, I'm a little puzzled.
No, sorry.
Okay.
I don't think that,
What we're saying.
yeah, that's not it. But having it's going to sound silly, but having a standing committee through the select board, they could continually, that group could make that recommendation year after year after year after year. Because I think that through some of these things that we have seen, that Rick, I think you are 100% correct that the select board and town admin is empowered to do a lot. I've gotten the sense that they need to hear it from somebody else. They need to hear it from a separate committee. And it's just been interesting that things that have popped up over the last few years, if there is no standing government study committee, there's not to say, oh my goodness, we do the most important work, or thank goodness we're here. But we've been leaned on by them and others to make recommendations or to look at things. And it would be good to have a standing committee that could constantly do that, not just one committee every 5 years. That's sort of the roundabout way that I was getting at.
Yeah.
What other
so
towns
I don't
actually
object to
have that form?
He sent out that thing last week of the other towns you could look at.
Yeah, I saw that. Those are the ones that have a standing governance committee.
I don't know. I haven't thoroughly vetted that question yet, to be honest.
Okay. All right. Well, to be continued.
Okay. All right, and we can, and I think we're on the right track with this, and I think it would be nice to get Tucker and Campbell's perspective as well. But I think we're moving in the right direction. Other business.
Lauren,
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
someday,
Okay.
2 years later.
Yeah. All right. So date and time of the next meeting. I'm with Curtis. I would love to try to meet next week, although it is school vacation week, but I'm not going anywhere because, exactly.
Okay.
So do you want to try for Tuesdays or Wednesdays better?
I have a doctor's appointment in Hyannis on Tuesday, the 20th, so I won't be available.
How about Wednesday, the 21st?
Should work. I have CPC on next Tuesday.
Okay, but what Wednesday should be good?
9, I can meet 10:30-ish, but not before on the 21st.
You want to do 10:30 on 10/21?
Fine with
Or
me.
4/21?
For me.
All right, fine with
And
me.
is that the meeting we're going to ask Nat Lowell if he
Yes.
wants to come to?
Yep,
That is also school vacation week, is it not?
it is. We'll see if he's available.
He has a child that's in school.
Well, how about this? We'll invite him. If not, I'm sure there are other things we can talk about. So in order for us to try to get going so we can get this bloody report done in the next 2 months.
Right. At the very least, that invitation establishes a dialogue or a relationship between our
Yep.
chair and the NPD chair. We'll see where we
Yep.
go.
There you go. Set up the dialogue. Okay. All right. So date and time of the next meeting, we have 4/21 at 10:30. All right, and I'll work on getting an agenda together on that. With nothing else, can I have a motion to adjourn at 10:42, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made and second. We'll do a roll call vote. Rick Atherton,
Aye.
Curtis Barnes,
All right.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
John Brescher, the chair votes aye as well. All right, thank you all very much. Much appreciated. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, John.
Go for it.
Happy Patriots Day.